pilot lectures black woman about flight etiquette. Seconds later, she grounds him permanently. High above the clouds, where turbulence can rattle even the steadiest nerves, a remarkable story unfolded, one that would forever change the perception of leadership and resilience. End of poem. Stay tuned as we unravel this incredible journey of courage and grace. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you love stories of resilience and justice, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more powerful narratives that inspire and empower. It was a crisp morning at the bustling city airport where travelers hurried through terminals and announcements echoed over the PA system. Among them was Sophia Hayes, moving with quiet confidence. With her leather travel bag slung over her shoulder, her sharp eyes scanned the signs leading to the first-class check-in. She answered the signs in French and then immediately looked back to him, her evident confusion suggestive. It was her first commercial flight since retiring from the Air Force, a career marked by countless successful missions and accolades as one of the military's most decorated pilots. Dressed in casual jeans and a button-up shirt, Sophia radiated an air of approachability. But beneath her modest appearance lay a formidable strength, honed through decades of experience in high-pressure situations. She had seen storms both in the air and in life, and learned to navigate them with grace. As she approached the check-in counter, she noticed a subtle flicker in the agent's expression. It was fleeting but unmistakable, the kind of silent judgment she'd encountered many times before. The agent's eyes lingered on Sophia's first-class ticket for a moment too long, her polite smile faltering ever so slightly. Sophia, however, remained unbothered. She offered a calm, "Good morning," as she handed over her documents, her voice steady and polite. The brief hesitation wasn't new to Sophia. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to the unspoken doubts of others, often rooted in her being a black woman in spaces where few expected her to excel. Whether it was at the airport or in the cockpit, the same subtle biases surfaced time and again. But Sophia never allowed these moments to define her. She accepted her documents back with a measured security, her demeanor unwavering. The security line brought more of the same, a quiet murmur from two men behind her about not pegging her for first-class material, spoken just loud enough for her to hear. Sophia didn't flinch. Her years in the military had taught her to conserve her energy for battles that truly mattered. She reached for her wine glass. Finally, she arrived at the first-class lounge, an oasis of calm amidst the chaos of the terminal. The staff greeted her warmly, a stark contrast to the subtle doubts she had faced earlier. Sophia settled into a comfortable chair, reflecting momentarily on the journey ahead. This trip wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about reconnecting with family and embracing the simple joys of life after a career spent in service. Little did she know the flight ahead would test her composure, resilience, and expertise in ways she hadn't anticipated. For Sophia, however, the challenges weren't something to fear. They were an opportunity to rise. As the boarding call echoed through the terminal, Sophia Hayes adjusted the strap of her travel bag and walked calmly toward the gate. She handed her first-class boarding pass to the attendant, who gave a cursory glance before waving her through. Stepping into the luxurious first-class cabin, Sophia was greeted by the faint hum of engines and the crisp, polished look of the seats. She chose a spot near the window, eager to enjoy the view without the responsibilities that had dominated her previous flights. But as she settled into her seat, Sophia couldn't ignore the sharp gaze of Captain Richard Banks, the flight's commanding officer. Standing near the cockpit, his posture was imposing, his tailored uniform accentuating his air of authority. His eyes lingered on Sophia for a moment too long, curious, scrutinizing. His expression wasn't overtly hostile, but it carried a faint smugness, as though he was evaluating whether she belonged there. Sophia returned his gaze with calm neutrality, refusing to rise to the silent challenge. Years of military service had taught her the power of composure, especially in the face of judgment. A few minutes later, Captain Banks strolled through the first-class cabin, greeting passengers with a practiced smile. When he reached Sophia, his smile tightened into something more calculated. "I hope you're comfortable, ma'am," he said, his tone smooth, but with an undertone of condescension. "I am, thank you," Sophia replied evenly, maintaining her poise. The captain paused, his expression unreadable. "Just a reminder," he added, lowering his voice slightly. "We have certain standards of etiquette in this cabin. We like to maintain a certain atmosphere." Sophia's grip on her water glass tightened slightly, but she kept her face impassive. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady and measured. "I'll be sure to meet your expectations." Captain Banks nodded, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Enjoy the flight," he said, turning on his heel and continuing down the aisle. Sophia exhaled slowly, allowing the faint tension in her chest to dissipate. The interaction was subtle but all too familiar. A man in a position of authority asserting himself, assuming superiority. Yet she had long since learned to let such moments roll off her back. It wasn't worth engaging. Finally, she nodded once. Song came on. Behind her, a hushed comment reached her ears. "First class? Didn't see that coming," a passenger muttered to his seatmate. Exasperated, the matriarch softly proclaimed that she wouldn't be stopping to descend further. Her serene exterior concealing the sting of those words, she reminded herself that she had nothing to prove to anyone. Her credentials, her experiences, and her unshakable confidence were more than enough. As the plane began to taxi to the runway, Sophia closed her eyes, letting the soft vibrations of the engines center her thoughts. She didn't know it yet, but the flight ahead would test her in ways she hadn't anticipated. And when the moment came, she would show Captain Banks and everyone else on board what true composure and expertise looked like. As the plane ascended to its cruising altitude, the gentle hum of the engines created a soothing atmosphere in the first-class cabin. Passengers chatted quietly, sipped their drinks, or immersed themselves in books and movies. Sophia Hayes kept her gaze on the clouds outside, enjoying the peace of simply being a passenger for once. But her calm demeanor began to shift when the captain's voice came over the intercom. Frey leaned forward, his eyes glued to the window to make sure the first-class passenger could see the mountains. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently cruising at 300 feet, Captain Banks announced, his tone smooth and authoritative. "However, we've encountered some unexpected weather ahead. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." "Sustained, Fireball 24A, said Mike. "Hold steady." The announcement was standard enough, but something in his voice caught Sophia's attention, a slight edge that didn't align with his usual confidence. Moments later, the plane jolted sharply, and the seatbelt sign lit up with a loud ding. Jason put down his book. Turbulence rattled the cabin, sending uneasy murmurs through the passengers. Sophia's instincts kicked in immediately. Decades of experience in the cockpit had taught her to sense when something wasn't quite right. She adjusted her position in her seat, her mind already analyzing the situation. Until she saw Joshua, a figure in his arms. The turbulence worsened, causing the plane to sway more violently. Drinks spilled, and passengers gripped their armrests, their nervous whispers filling the cabin. Sophia glanced out the window. The once white clouds had turned into an ominous gray mass, swirling with flashes of lightning. Another announcement followed, this time with less composure in Captain Banks' voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered stronger turbulence than expected. We're rerouting to avoid the worst of it. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The word rerouting sent a chill down Sophia's spine. She knew that decision wasn't made lightly. It indicated a significant risk. Her sharp ears picked up a subtle change in the engine's pitch, an uneven whine that didn't match the usual rhythm. It was faint, but to Sophia, it was unmistakable. The vessel left offshore. Her eyes narrowed as she pieced together the situation. Turbulence, severe weather, and now what sounded like an engine imbalance. She glanced at the flight attendants, who were visibly tense. their smiles strained as they reassured passengers. Sophia made her decision. Unbuckling her seatbelt, she stood carefully despite the plane's unsteady movements. The flight attendant nearest to her rushed over, her expression a mix of panic and authority. "Jackson, ma'am, please sit down," she said, her voice urgent. "It's not safe to be up right now." Sophia met her gaze calmly. The flight attendant hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "Ma'am, the captain is handling the situation. I need you to return to your seat." Sophia's voice remained firm but respectful. "I'm not here to interfere. But if what I suspect is true, the situation may be more serious than you realize. Please, let me speak with him." Jack finished his whiskey and turned to Sophia, his voice low. Reluctantly, the attendant picked up the intercom phone and relayed Sophia's request. Moments later, the reply came through, sharp and dismissive. "The captain is handling it. Tell her to return to her seat." Sophia exhaled slowly, suppressing her frustration. She had expected resistance, but she wasn't deterred. She stepped closer to the intercom and spoke directly into it. "Captain Banks, this isn't about stepping on your authority. It's about ensuring the safety of everyone on this plane. I've logged over 2 decades of flight time, including emergencies far worse than this. If you need assistance, I'm here." A tense silence followed, broken only by the plane's unsteady movements. Finally, the captain's voice returned, less sharp, but still hesitant. "Come to the cockpit." Sophia nodded to the flight attendant, who stepped aside with visible reluctance. She made her way toward the cockpit, her steps steady despite the turbulence. When she entered, the scene confirmed her suspicions. The radar displayed a storm system more severe than she'd anticipated, and one of the engine indicators showed a troubling imbalance. Her intern would be filling her in for the radar class soon, and she'd feel no pressure to fail her mission. Captain Banks glanced at her, his jaw tight. "What do you think you can do?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Sophia didn't flinch. "I can help you navigate this," she said simply. "Let's focus on getting everyone through this safely." The co-pilot, visibly tense, glanced at Banks. "Captain, maybe we should listen to her. The autopilot adjustments aren't cutting it, and the turbulence is throwing off our readings." Brand paused, taking a deep breath. Banks hesitated, the conflict evident on his face. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Fine. What do you suggest?" Sophia stepped forward, her eyes scanning the controls. "First, we need to stabilize the engines. The imbalance is affecting thrust efficiency. Let's adjust manually." Under her guidance, the team worked to steady the plane. Her calm, authoritative presence filled the cockpit, diffusing the tension. Though the storm still raged outside, Sophia's expertise began to turn the tide inside. The cockpit was a cacophony of sound. Alerts blared intermittently, the radar displayed a swirling storm, and the strained voices of Captain Banks and the co-pilot filled the air as they struggled to manage the turbulence. As Sophia Hayes stepped into the confined space, the tension was palpable, but no one spoke as they waited for the sound of a flight to come online. That was the word. Captain Banks glanced at her briefly, his jaw tight. "This is under control," he snapped, his voice betraying the stress he was under. Sophia ignored the hostility, her calm demeanor unwavering. "I'm here to assist, not take over," she replied evenly, her voice steady and composed. "Let's focus on stabilizing the situation." Zoe backed away, considering, nervous and thankful for the fact that Fiona hadn't made it on the plane with her. Her eyes quickly scanned the instrument panel. The storm ahead was severe. Deep red and purple zones on the radar indicated heavy turbulence and wind shear. One engine's thrust indicator was fluctuating, a clear sign of imbalance. To make matters worse, the co-pilot was struggling with unreliable communications, with signals to air traffic control cutting in and out. "What's the current plan?" Sophia asked, keeping her tone neutral. "We're rerouting to the nearest airport," Banks replied curtly. "Shorter runway, but it's our best option." Sophia nodded, processing the information. "The engine imbalance is the bigger issue right now. If we don't stabilize it, it'll make descent much harder, especially with this wind shear. I still stood. The co-pilot, visibly anxious, chimed in. We've been trying to adjust, but the autopilot isn't compensating properly. When was the last time we checked our autopilot? Then it's time to take manual control, Sophia said firmly, stepping closer to the controls. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. Reduce the power on the affected engine slightly and balance it with thrust from the other. It'll reduce overall speed, but it'll stabilize the plane for descent. Captain Banks hesitated, his hand tightening on the yoke. It was clear he was torn, pride battling with practicality. Finally he nodded, albeit reluctantly. Fine. Do it. Sam kicked the jet engine. Get the hellas away from here. Sophia worked seamlessly with the co-pilot, adjusting the engine controls manually. The plane shuddered, but began to steady. Good, she said, her voice calm. Now let's focus on the descent. The shorter runway means you'll need a longer glide path. We can't afford sharp maneuvers in these conditions. The first flight began short, like sound, and they steadied their climb. The captain gave her a wary glance. You sure about this? The goddess said. I've done this before, Sophia replied, her tone leaving no room for doubt. Trust me. The plane dipped slightly as they began their descent. The cockpit remained tense, but Sophia's presence was a steadying force. She kept a close eye on the radar and wind shear warnings, giving precise instructions. Sophia must have restrained some source of strength because she ultimately decided that the radar was worth bringing along. Adjust to a shallower angle, she directed. The crosswinds are strong. We need to counter them gradually to maintain stability. The co-pilot followed her instructions, his movements more confident now. Even Captain Banks seemed to relax slightly, though his jaw remained clenched. As they neared the airport, the storm's intensity didn't let up. Lightning flashed in the distance, and the turbulence tested the crew's resolve. Sophia's voice cut through the chaos, calm and authoritative. Keep your hands steady on the yoke, she told Banks. Small corrections only. Let the plane respond naturally to the wind shifts. The runway came into view, a strip of lights flickering through the storm. The co-pilot's voice trembled slightly as he updated their position to the tower through the unreliable communication system. Tower confirms clearance, he reported, relief evident in his tone. E.R. Walker was the tower spokesman. He didn't first object to assigning White as the nameboard signature. Sophia leaned forward. Extend the flaps gradually. We need maximum lift to counter the reduced thrust from the engine. The plane began its final approach, the cockpit filled with the sounds of alerts and the rhythmic hum of the engines. The descent was smooth but tense, every second requiring precise adjustments. Speed's good, Sophia noted, her eyes flicking to the altimeter. You're aligned. Stay the course. The plane touched down with a heavy thud, the tires screeching against the rain-slick runway. Banks and the co-pilot engaged the reverse thrusters and the aircraft slowed to a stop, the tension in the cabin dissipating as applause erupted from the passengers. The young man still backing Kispin's plane on set glanced at the cockpit and at Hampton with a blank look. Sophia leaned back slightly, exhaling for the first time since stepping into the cockpit. Well done, she said simply, glancing at Captain Banks. He didn't respond immediately, his hands still gripping the controls. Finally, he turned to her, his expression unreadable. Thanks, he said gruffly. Thanks for accepting the flight. Then he returned his attention to Sophia nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. She hadn't stepped in to undermine anyone. She had done it to ensure the safety of everyone on board. And now, with the crisis averted, she knew she had earned the respect of even the most skeptical among them. The plane came to a gradual stop on the rain-slick runway, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, a wave of applause erupted from the passengers, breaking the tension that had gripped the cabin throughout the turbulent flight. In first class, passengers exchanged relieved glances, some looking toward the cockpit with curiosity, others in disbelief at the drama that had unfolded. Finally, the plane came to a stop and then plunged into the landscape with a light, deathly calm, gathering direction among the flight attendants. The world of breaking news and performance filtered forward. Sophia Hayes exited the cockpit with her calm demeanor intact, her presence a stark contrast to the storm they had just navigated. She walked back to her seat to retrieve her bag, ignoring the hushed whispers around her. A local flight attendant held the invitations in their hands and arranged the floating packages with them back to her cabin. "That's her," one passenger murmured. She went into the cockpit. What was she doing up there? Sophia offered no explanations. She wasn't seeking recognition. She had done what needed to be done. However, as she sat down, a man across the aisle, one of the passengers who had doubted her earlier, hesitated before speaking. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Were you helping the pilots?" Sophia met his gaze and gave a small, measured nod. "I did what I could," she replied simply. Meanwhile, back in the cockpit, Captain Banks was grappling with the events that had transpired. His initial pride and skepticism had made him reluctant to accept Sophia's help, but her calm expertise and decisive actions had been pivotal in ensuring a safe landing. Still, acknowledging that fact didn't come easily. When the airline's operations manager arrived for a debrief, Banks spoke cautiously. "She provided valuable input," he admitted, his tone grudging. Her experience was evident. Sophia joined the meeting shortly after, her composed presence filling the room. When asked about her role, she spoke plainly but firmly. "I stepped in because the situation required it. My priority was the safety of everyone on board, not stepping on anyone's authority." Banks listened in silence, his expression unreadable. But as the debrief concluded, he finally approached her. "You kept us steady back there," he said, his voice quieter now. "I didn't give you the benefit of the doubt when you walked into the cockpit. That was a mistake." Her smile returned. Doran replied. Sophia's gaze softened slightly. A faint smile tugged at the corners of Banks's mouth as he nodded. It wasn't an apology, but it was the beginning of mutual respect. As Sophia exited the terminal, the rain still falling outside, she reflected on the flight. It wasn't the turbulence or the challenges in the cockpit that lingered in her mind. It was the quiet shift in understanding, a reminder that even the most entrenched assumptions can be challenged by the right actions at the right time. This was something that sometimes Carlo couldn't understand. He had been raised upon soul training in America and set his heart solely on. As the plane came to a safe stop on the runway, Sophia Hayes had once again proven the value of experience, composure, and unwavering confidence in the face of adversity. Her actions during the crisis weren't driven by a need for recognition, but by a commitment to the safety of everyone on board. Decades of training, countless hours in high-pressure situations, and her ability to remain calm under fire had made all the difference that day. But this wasn't just a story about saving a flight. It was a lesson in breaking stereotypes and redefining leadership. Sophia's journey revealed the importance of humility, not only for herself but also for those around her, like Captain Banks. His initial doubts about Sophia were rooted in assumptions, but her actions dismantled those biases, leaving behind mutual respect and a new understanding of what true leadership looks like. Leadership isn't about holding on to authority or always having the answers. It's about recognizing the strengths of others and knowing when to trust them, even if it challenges your pride. Sophia's courage, grace, and expertise serve as a powerful reminder that strength is found not in appearances, but in character and actions. What lessons can we take from Sophia's story? Perhaps it's to challenge our assumptions, embrace humility, and most importantly, trust in the power of resilience. If this story inspired you, share it with others who need a reminder of what leadership and determination can achieve. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of courage and triumph. Together, let's celebrate the strength of individuals like Sophia, who continue to inspire us all.